One thing is for certain. Just because it's tried and true doesn't mean it's working right now. So the big question is this: where can you learn what is working right now? The strategies, the tactics, the psychology, and the exact how-to. How to grow your business. How to blow up your personal brand and supercharge your personal growth. That is the question, and this podcast will give you the answer. My name is Sharran Srivatsaa, and welcome to Business School. First times we were hanging out and talking about real estate, you said to me, hey, so why are you trying to figure all this out? Let's just go use the data that already exists. And you may not even remember this, but you said, let's just pull it up on Google Trends.
Right.
And I was like, what the heck is Google Trends? And why am I trying to figure all this out by myself? And
Right.
literally you showed me just keyword demand and what people are searching. And from that day on, which is just a few years ago, I'm embarrassed that I didn't know that existed. I was literally doing everything by gut and feel. And from that
Right.
day on, anytime I want to launch something, think about a demand for a product, think about how something works, I kind of say, well, let's see what the world is doing already. So I'd love for you to maybe just say, like, give us a little kind of primer on
Yeah.
why people are crazy not to like start their idea search and see how the world is thinking about it using a free tool like Google Trends.
Yeah. I mean, I think the thing is Google Trends. So first, if we think of Google, right, averages, I think it's 4 billion searches per day. Right? So an astronomical number. And what's really fascinating about that 4 billion searches, it's, I think for the last 8 years, it's been an average of 17% of searches that they see on a daily basis they have never seen before.
Wow.
So, those are some pretty amazing stats. Um, what I like about Google Trends more than anything else is that it taps into the subconscious mind. Most people, what will end up happening, if they are thinking of something, they will actually turn to Google first before they vocalize that idea to anyone that they may know, family, friends, relatives, so on and so forth. So I think it gives you this ability to kind of tap into the subconscious mind of the entire world in a really easy way.
Yeah.
And that trend line usually is a leading indicator of actions that are going to come based on however you formulate, the question. So if you do something really simple, like, let's say if you want to see like which politician is doing pretty good, like you just type in their names and you'll see like what is the overall trend of people tapping into, searching by a name, and then it's going to make kind of keyword recommendations, and you can zoom in and kind of zoom out in terms of location and everything like that. But it's this tapping into the subconscious before it ends up happening, to me, is what's super, super powerful. So like you can see very distinct trends. So like, let's say if there's again, I'll just stick kind of to political stuff. Like if you type in the word cancel culture, you'll see like an instant spike of this once it kind of became mainstream and people starting to look it up and trying to figure out like what does this mean, right?
Yeah.
And so those trends can transcend everything, any kind of business. So if you're interested in Instagram or, marketing or anything like that, or any kind of, if you're trying to do some kind of marketing that revolves around demand gen, you can actually see, is there a demand slowly building? Are people subconsciously thinking about that and starting to search that so that you could get yourself a little bit ahead of the curve? So
Yeah, dude, it's so spot on. And I also think from what you and I got a little kind of ninja about when we talked about this was we were talking about just use of language.
Yes.
And we'll take an example that everybody understands. And we have a bunch of real estate clients. And I was like, hey, we talked about the word home versus house. And I literally was like, there's no way that
changes. And I'd love for you to maybe, like, you were like, Sharran, look at this. This is completely different. The subconscious is searching for house, but we think we're being, you know, cool by using the word home, but that's not how the world, that's not how the consumer's looking at this.
Right. Yeah. You know, because it's a direct connection between your mind, the subconscious, to, you know, your fingertips to kind of search that stuff. It's going to be a lot more informal, and it's going to process in the way that people are kind of thinking. And so you'll see very distinct trend lines, the difference, you know, between house and home. You know, people will, instead of selling, you know, as a real estate agent, you might do your marketing, say, you know, thinking of selling your home. But the reality is what people are really searching for is selling my house.
Yeah.
Because they're thinking, they're talking to themselves. So they use my and I and me versus you and you. Things like that. So it's very, you see very clear trend lines like that. So just by changing kind of some of the marketing messaging, or even like the imagery, like we've done tests where we've done kind of some images, and what we do is we take that exact keyword phrase and put it in quotes with like an image that is going to be like, let's say someone who's worried about something. And we show like in quotes the exact phrase that they're thinking, because that's going to resonate much more, and it's going to have a higher, you know, engagement rate. And you can find all of this stuff by, you know, using, for example, like Google Trends. So
dude, and I think that's just from a super tactical perspective, that reminds me, I should probably talk to my team by saying, hey, listen, why are you waiting on me to come up with the 4 or 5 words you need to use on a thumbnail for a YouTube video or a Instagram IGTV, et cetera? Like, let's use stuff that is already going on in people's minds, because that's what they're looking, thinking, typing anyway.
Yeah, for sure. And what's beautiful about it is, you know, you can start to see like even geographically differences in those search terms. And so, you know, when you start to narrow down on that Google Trends, just a super powerful tool. And there's even like a subsection where you can look to see not just Google search trends, but you could actually see like YouTube search trends. So in one of the drop downs, it's actually in there. So, and image search and everything else. So, so it's to me, it's one of the most powerful tools that you can actually use, because like if you, for, you know, those of you that are real estate, just put the difference between sell house and sell home, and you're going to see the trend lines are a little bit different. They'll kind of follow in parallel, but one is going to be significantly higher than the other. And so, you know, the basics of SEO kind of marketing and marketing it as a whole is you got to deliver the right message to the right person. And so if you're using the words that they are thinking, it's naturally going to resonate more with them, and it's going to increase your overall, you know, response rates, because that's what they're really searching for. And for Google, from an SEO perspective, if you're using the correct word, by default, that's what, you know, Google is basically using in as far as metadata and stuff like that. So, so just getting all of that in alignment is gonna make it make your marketing stand out a lot more and get found a lot more. So
there's a copywriting thing that I try to always say, which that is not mine, I found it somewhere else, which is, you know, our job is to enter the conversation in the prospect's mind, right? So but I think the conversation in the prospect's mind, like you said, which is the key hook for me here, is the conversation in my mind is one thing, how I manifest it on search is completely different. And if I'm going to use search to get into my mind, I need to use that language. I can't just guess what's going on in the prospect's mind. And that was like the meta hook for me when I first started. I was like, oh my gosh, like I'm thinking about what my ideal client is thinking, but what they're thinking is not how they're translating it. I need to think about the translation of the words there, because they're not saying, how do I sell my house during the pandemic? That's not what they're saying. They're just saying sell my house, like, because they want the shortest possible keywords to get a search going. it's important for
Right.
us to do that. Let's talk about this for a second. So here I am. I take this advice. I go, to Google Trends. I play around with it. I learn, take a couple of insights. I see a demand. So let's say there's a demand. I'm launching a product, whatever the product might be. I'm launching, a new course or whatever. What do I do next? Like, how do I take that and then let's walk through the journey a little bit. What do I do next?
Yeah, I mean, I think, there's a couple things. Like I have what I call, we're all pretty familiar with, we call them funnels or whatever it might be.
Right.
Like, and so a while back ago, I came up with an acronym that I called A.R.T. So A.R.T is A.R.T. And so marketing is really art. And so what A.R.T stands for is aspirational, research, and transactional. So the top of the funnel is aspirational. So this is that very short tail, top of the funnel, top of Google search trend kind of keyword search. And so this is what sparks the idea. It's aspirational to begin with. I think as you start to kind of drill down, and if you think that a consumer who wants to buy something or do something, they're going to start off with an idea, which is usually going to be aspirational. And then they're going to get into the research phase of executing on that idea and making that aspiration a reality.
Right.
And so I like to use the word research because you'll see that the search trends start to change. And so if we use an example of, let's say, sell house, the next level down may be sell house fast. It might be sell house during a COVID, sell house after mortgage forbearance, or anything related to that. So that's where they start getting a little bit more into the research phase.
Yeah.
And what we find is the deeper that they get into the research phase, eventually they're going to get transactional. So if we think of like that kind of keyword journey, and we'll just use the real estate example, it might be sell house fast, or sell house to begin with, then sell house fast. And then near the transactional part of it is best realtor to sell a house fast, or, realtor near me. And that's the entire journey from aspirational, research, and transactional. So what's important is, if you're going to do some marketing on this stuff, is to really kind of contemplate those three phases of a consumer.
Yeah.
And whatever the product or service may be, think, what is the idea that they're going to spark with? And you can use Google Trends to help you kind of find that. And then in the research phase, think of what are the steps that someone would need to do or learn in order to make that aspiration a reality. And so as you put out content that is in an alignment with that educational process, and you're using words and imagery that are also in alignment in that art funnel, you can actually, just by the way that they're interacting with the content, almost grade them where they're at.
Yeah.
Are they in aspirational and research, or in transactional phase?
Yeah.
And then, what you want to do is you just want to make sure that you're providing the ability to access that information in a way that is in alignment with intent. So if we think of the top of the funnel of art and aspirational, they're not ready to talk to anybody. So they want, as much information, and they're just going to gather it wherever they can. And that should probably be non-gated.
Right.
And you want to use that aspirational stuff to start developing a relationship, start, some branding and some retargeting. In the research phase is where you could start showing kind of some gated content. And that gated content can be off of, form fills that you want to use on your website, if that's, the way that most of the traffic is coming in.
Right.
We like to use text for info, since, nearly 55% of all web traffic now is on a mobile device anyway. So if you remove the form, it becomes frictionless. And then the higher the intent or closer to transactional, you just want to make sure that it's easy for the customer to contact you with the least amount of friction possible.
Yeah.
And using technology that is the most accessible to everyone, which is probably, you know, just a telephone number.
Yeah. 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 You know, I think, dude, I've talked to you a long time. I've seen a lot of your stuff. I don't know why this is the first. This is awesome, and it made me instantly think about the how you can stay congruent through the process, right? So if you are putting something aspirational out, and you know literally what the, I hate to call it, I don't want to call it call to action, but I know what the next logical step is.
Correct.
So I never have to say, go from an aspirational thing to saying, call me right now. Because that is literally a congruency break in that, right? So you can say,
exactly.
Oh, most people that think about this, think about these next 4 questions, click here to read this blog post on the 4 questions that most of my clients ask me. Right?
Exactly.
Exactly. Yeah.
And that's, you know, that's the logical step of a traditional funnel at the end of the day, right? Is that you need to be hyper aware of that consumer journey. And so if you understand where they're entering that journey, then you want basically the messaging, like you said, to be congruent with wherever they're at based on the entry point.
Right.
So, you know, just making that easy and being super, super thoughtful of that process. And I think, you know, for a lot of marketers, what ends up happening is that, you know, we want to go straight to call to action and cash a check.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, of course.
The reality is, for depending on the product cycle, you know, a lot of that stuff could be really, really long term. I mean, even if we think of, like, let's say Amazon, you know, I think some stats, the most recent stats that I read was that Amazon only has a, and I say only, most people are going to kill for this, 37% like add to cart completion rate.
Wow.
So, you know, 67% of the time, even though you have like a 1-click button, the person's already made the decision, already added into cart with a trusted brand and everything, 67% of the time, you know, or 63% of the time, Amazon still has to retarget you and remind you to complete the purchase.
Yeah.
And so I think if you, as a business owner and a marketer, if you think about, you know, one of the most successful companies in the world, if their business, they've focused on making it as simple as possible, and they're still getting that kind of quote unquote low carry through, we need to be much more thoughtful in terms of being in all aspects of that consumer journey. And, you know, as we get them closer to that transactional phase, you know, they may be diverted because we're in an attention economy, right? Everybody is fighting for that attention. So even though they're right then and there, you know, it just takes a DM from someone, or a new tweet, or, you know, a text message, or a Facebook message to break that person's attention and get them out of transactional phase. Doesn't mean that they're not interested.
Right.
This means they got interrupted, and we just need to be there again, you know.
Dude, that's so good. I love what you just said. It doesn't mean that they're not interested. It's just that they got interrupted. And how many times do we get like interrupted, right? All the time. Right. And that, so so this is really good. So there is, how do you translate something like the kind of the A.R.T framework to kind of modern social media, where I'm Sharran, I'm putting out content on a platform like an Instagram, for example, just something that everyone understands.
Right.
How do I, in your approach, what's the best way to create aspirational stuff, and then how do you take them through that journey? Is it staying on the platform, going into stories, taking them off the platform? Like, walk us through like your if there was a happy path, what would that happy path be?
Well, I think, you know, at the end of the day, right, if we think of the end result, where that transactional path is going to end, there's usually one of two things, and it's really kind of product or service dependent. It's either they're going to interact with someone or they're going to interact directly with, a website and self-service, basically. So I think when you kind of work your way in reverse from that A.R.T funnel, and you go from transactional up to research and you go up to aspirational, if you think of what is the end result, how is that person most likely going to execute on the idea or, the aspiration they originally had and make it a reality? Because all we're really trying to do is go from aspiration to reality. So when we take a look at this, and let's just say, we use an example of women's makeup, right? Something that is highly promoted on Instagram. So you're going to see like a woman may think of like, oh, I want to figure out how to do smoky eyeshadow. Right? So the aspirational side of it is initially they see a picture of a model that might have smoky eyeshadow.
Right.
That's the aspirational.
Got it.
The next phase of that might be like, how do I do that? So then they're going to start doing those kind of searches related to that. So if you're putting out, content on Instagram or, any of the other social media platforms, this is where you're going to fall into that kind of how-to curiosity or tips, that kind of content, and you're going to catch them in kind of in that mid, research kind of phase. And then the transactional at the bottom of the funnel is really just going to be dependent on the service. So, let's say if we use the makeup example, it might be like aspirational image of smoky eyeshadow, with basically a follow-up content or retargeting from aspirational to research based on people who have interacted. So either your followers or pixel data, you're going to move them down into, how-to. So that's kind of the research phase of it. And then in that how-to may be recommendations for the actual product so that they can execute on the idea. So the very bottom of the funnel may be like, buy, smoky black eyeshadow here, right?
Yeah. Dude, first, I didn't know anything. I didn't know anything about smoky eyeshadow. So,
well, that's what happens when you have a teenage daughter.
I was like, whoa, that's I had no idea what that was. That's so Dave, I spent a lot of time on a couple of these platforms. So to really, if I were to think about something, it would be like, okay, I have an aspirational post that talks about, like you said, smoky eyeshadow. Then maybe I either have an IGTV video that actually breaks down, hey, here's how to actually apply it, use it, whatever. Maybe then I have some Instagram stories that talk about, hey, here's the before and after of how this was used. And then the call to action is, hey, I have a link in my bio for 20% off, or swipe up to get to check out a video of how this is done, or get your own manual on how you can do this right now. Literally, you're at some point in time, you're either capturing intent in some way, right?
Exactly. And, I think it just depends on, how, if you think of the manner in which they're going to collect the information is a really strong indicator of intent, right? So someone who's filling out a form may be lower intent. And then the next level of intent may be, sending a text requesting for information. And then the highest level of intent is, let's say, for example, if you're using IG, it could be you, Sharran, saying like, if you're interested, if you have any questions about, how to take your business to the next level, just call or text me, and here's my number. That is going to be really high intent because it is the most two-way interaction, right? That person is looking or reaching out directly to have that conversation one-to-one. And it's this jumping from kind of one to many or self-serve 0 to 1 to basically P2P is, peer-to-peer, and having a two-way conversation is the highest intent. So on IG and some of those platforms, the previous way was going, sending a DM or kind of interacting that way, or clicking the link in the bio and stuff like that. But where I think, a lot of people miss maybe some opportunities in there, especially if you're more like a service or a consultant kind of person, is to actually give people a really simple way to get a hold of you using technology that is accessible to everyone, which is still going to end up being a phone number. Like, that is the oldest, most accessible technology to everyone.
Yeah.
And we're seeing that kind of trend really pop up, whether it's, the political campaigns that are asking people to send text so that they can start a two-way conversation. You're seeing on IG, influencers that are using phone numbers to develop, one-to-one relationships. And that transition from like being kind of public and having a two-way conversation in the comments, depending on whatever the aspiration is, right? If it's something that they need to be private about, they want to have one-to-one, and you just want to give that person that ability. So I think if you start to think of that entire journey, what happens is you can give them the options to self-identify and make their inquiry through, let's say, filling out a form, sending a DM, taking the next level of intent a little bit higher, and then, to the highest level of maybe, direct one-to-one communication. So I think it's really dependent on the product or service. But when you think about how inquiry type is an indicator of intent, that becomes very powerful.
Yeah, totally. I'll give you something that you probably know this because you are a master in the direct response space. One thing that I love doing, focus group of one, which is literally my wife, right? Like, for her, she's a consumer. She buys stuff all the time. And anytime I talk to somebody that is unrelated to what I do, I always will just like, I love focus groups of ones because it gives their, especially since I know their buying patterns and their psychology, right? So I asked my wife, I said, well, hey, why don't you want to call this number? And she's like, well, I don't want to talk to anybody.
Right.
I was like, huh, okay. Would you text the number? She goes, maybe. And I go, well, then I was thinking about this, Jessie. I said, would it be amazing if I put a blurb that said, text this number and I'm happy to get you whatever information you need during your process. You don't even have to talk to me.
Right.
And literally saying you don't even have to talk to me. I said, so I actually told my wife then. She goes, well, if you told me that up front, I would totally text you. And I was like, this is amazing. Like how, like, and so we are thinking that, oh, maybe they'll text us. And because all she doesn't want to do is she actually wants to buy. She just doesn't want to talk.
Right.
And I actually think, and she's not even a millennial. So I think this is even more pronounced if you're selling anything kind of in the teens, tweens, millennials category, that just tell people, hey, here's an email, because they know with email, you're not going to force them on a call, but they think a lot of times that, oh, now they have my mobile number, they'll call me. I think that's the fear sometimes. And maybe it is, I don't know, focus group of one. And that's why I say, I've been talking to anybody, that all the CEOs that I mentor and their marketing teams, listen, hey, if you're putting text in there, say, happy to work with you. You don't even have to talk to me. And like, literally, I've not looked at conversion metrics, but have you seen anything like that? Or what language do you use to break, kind of give them the safety barrier that they're not going to get called and sold and pounded with calls after?
I think there's two things that are kind of happening, right? The first thing is that there's lots and lots of studies that talk about form friction, right? If I have a form and it's got, first name, last name, prefix, email, phone number, it feels evasive. The more form, the more fields that we're trying to collect, because really it's an exchange of value, right? It's like, am I willing to exchange this information or my personal information for what I'm going to get at the other end, which is, kind of this perceived value. And the one thing I think with, kind of form fills and stuff like that is that they feel that there is a lack of control Meaning, like, if I fill out this form, where's my information going to end up at, right? And who's going to have it, and how can I stop people from contacting me thereafter? The one thing with, let's say, requesting text, and by kind of pre-framing it and telling people, like, you don't need to talk to us, like, this is just a self-service, is that you remove the form.
Yeah.
And forms on mobile are pretty hard to fill out. And this is why, you know, Google and Facebook are all trying to solve this by using, you know, the profile button as a login to exchange information in the form of lead ads and stuff like that. But when you pre-frame it and tell the consumer and give them kind of certainty that, you know, you don't need to talk to anyone and we're going to instantly text you back the information, what they do feel is that they know they can control their, you know, the communication that comes into their phone, and they can easily block you and, you know, reply back to stop or whatever it might be. So I think there's a sense of control that consumers feel like they have with text for info.
Yeah.
And because you're reducing the friction, as long as you don't abuse that, I think you're going to be in a really good position, because you're not asking for a lot from them in order for that exchange of information or of value, right? And they don't feel like they're giving up anything. And that's powerful. The natural idea of filling out a form, like when you hear data breaches and stuff like that, it's always from people that have filled out their forms and made a purchase online or something like that. So there's a little bit of tentative feeling when it comes to filling out a form, because it feels kind of evasive to begin with. So, you know, we know the difference in conversion between, you know, a 5-form fill and a 3-form fill. A 3-field form is, you know, 20 or 30, 40% difference in completion rate. So if you remove the form altogether, then what happens? Much higher intent, and you get basically the ability to have a two-way peer-to-peer kind of conversation with that particular person. And that's powerful. You know, and that's the power of like a DM, you know, on Instagram or anything like that, or any of the other social media platforms, you know, of messaging as a whole. So
I'll tell you this. So one of my mentors, who is an amazing marketer, many people know him. His name is Joe Polish. And Joe is a total stud. He, if you can sell, I mean, he was a carpet cleaner. Like, if you can sell carpet cleaning, dude, you can sell anything. Like, it's insane if you can sell carpet cleaning. And he told me 2 things. And he says, if he were ever to get into any business, as long as people have a phone, he says there's 2 things that he would do. He would always start with what he calls a consumer guide. And he's like, hey, this is a consumer guide to having your carpet clean. So now it feels like, even though it's me, Jessie, at Call Action, or it's me, Sharran, at whatever, or it's me, Joe Polish, at whatever, if you build a consumer guide, they're like, oh, it's a consumer guide. Right. And I want it. I want to see what, you know, this is what's good for me. So he's like, I will get people the consumer guide to help them go from as quickly from aspiration to the research phase, so that they know what to ask for. So you guide them in the questions you ask them. Dude, the second thing though, I don't know if you've ever done this. I've done this as a, you know, in the last 10 years before pre-hyper kind of internet conversion was a pre-recorded message. Call this number for a pre-recorded message. And I'm not joking, dude. You remember it's crazy. You and I are going to date ourselves here. BMG Columbia House. Like, I ordered this CD. Like, I called for a pre-recorded message.
Yes.
Call a 1-800 number. They say, hey, thank you for calling the BMG line. This is what we do. We send you 4 CDs. The first 4 are free. You just have to pay shipping and handling. I'm like, that's a free plus shipping funnel. Like, I had no idea all that exists. And so just getting what we're doing is saying, hey, he just said, if someone is going to call that number and listen to a pre-recorded message, like, can you imagine the intent behind that? That's insane.
Right. Yeah, the intent is really high. And if you know, and there's less friction than filling out something. And now what's even more interesting is that you can go straight from, let's say a text straight into like video content. You can text back, deep links to private videos that actually become a one-to-one relationship building consumer guide. So imagine if someone wanted to learn a little bit more about, Instagram marketing, and you're like, hey, text, and I'll show you my 3-step, guide basically to this information. But that guide is really a link to a deep, a private video that you have on your blog or something, some content that they can't find directly. Now you're not only transcending, verbal communication, but you're having body language and everything that is needed in order to build trust basically with that consumer. And you're able to convey that, instantly with the minimal amount of friction. The other powerful part of why, for example, like the political campaigns right now, political campaigns are, arguably some of the most savvy marketers in the world. If you watched, the old Cambridge Analytica Netflix docs, you'll learn that pretty quickly. But the whole thing is that as we kind of transcend from landlines to mobile, a mobile number is almost like a social security number, right? It's a very powerful indicator of who that person is. And using kind of Facebook retargeting and stuff like that, you can do, really powerful retargeting just off of phone numbers. And so, it's almost like the internet has kind of come completely full circle, in my opinion, is if we think of the early on, we used 800 numbers, right? Like you said, I still remember I had an A.R.T telecom account for, press 1 for IVR voicemail and stuff like that. And that was pretty cutting edge and did pretty good with that. When the internet really kind of came to play, if we think of the early access that we had was, instead of watching Friends, we went to our room, dialed up or dialed into the internet, and we filled out forms. And we filled out forms because we were accessing the internet oftentimes 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 o'clock at night, right? And we're doing these really extended research phases because we had limited access. We had limited amount of time to access the internet. And what has really changed, the iPhone is 2007, so it's not really, really old, right? Is that we had this instant on-demand access to the internet. So how we access information has changed completely from gobbling, hours-long sessions of data and trying to learn everything in a single seating, typically later in the evenings, which is the reason why we filled out a form, because it was the only way that we expected a response back. Because if I'm, trying to learn something and I was interested in interacting with a business, if I called them at midnight, like I'm not going to get an answer. So it made sense to fill out the form.
Right.
Today, our search process, that A.R.T funnel from aspirational to research to transactional, we don't gobble giant bites. We take lots of little appetizers. So you have a thought, right? And this goes back to kind of Google Trends. Hey, I wonder about X. And you do a quick Google search at the instant, on your fingertips, basically. And you get that one piece of information to solve that need that you have of collecting bits of information to move from aspirational to research.
Right.
So instead of doing collecting it all at one time, you're just getting these multiple exposures, really small bits here and there, here and there, here and there. And those are the breadcrumbs of that consumer journey, right?
Yeah.
So in today's world, as we've kind of come full circle, now that we're not filling out, we're not accessing the internet at 11 o'clock at night all of the time, we don't need to fill out forms. So that's why the forms themselves feel a little bit more evasive.
Yeah.
And why we've come full circle back to just the phone now, right? Like using your, you know, your album, call the 800 number to learn about this.
Yeah.
We've come full circle to that because that technology is the oldest one. It's also the most prevalent one right now. You know, there's more mobile phones in the United States than there are people, right? And that's pretty amazing if you think about that, because we've all had multiple, you know, mobile phones, and a lot of business people have 2 mobile phones.
Right.
And so, so if you think of that kind of instant access and removing friction and solving instant access when you're thirsty for that information, what is the fastest mode of communication, right? It's always going to end up being a phone call of some sort. So, you know, it's sad when you look at a lot of mobile sites. You know, everyone kind of talks about mobile access websites and stuff like that, but you look at the mobile access website, which you know someone is accessing on a phone, but yet you gate the ability for that person to reach you because you have a contact us form, right? Which is kind of an oxymoron if you think about that.
So wild. Hey, what I'd love for you to, if you would love to share, is you were sharing with me about kind of these steps on just very tactically on, hey, if someone, you know, posts something on Instagram, for example, has a number, the number gets to a website, the website there's retargeting. Like, can you walk through one of the flows that you've built that you've seen convert? Because I think that it totally brings the power of this journey to life.
Sure. So, you know, I'll give you some examples. Like, we've done some YouTube videos and stuff like that. And so YouTube videos are nice because they pop up in obviously Google search results and stuff like that. They're kind of viral. They're shared everywhere and things. And so what we'll do is we'll do a video about specific content. And we've done this in blog posts and stuff like that as well. So it might be free information initially that they use either an aspirational or the start of kind of research phase. And then what we'll do is we'll basically do a text for info. So they send a keyword to a specific phone number, and, you know, we say that it's text for info, self-service. You'll instantly get back the information that you requested. And so inside of that content, we'll make that available, and it might be a checklist or a deeper guide to make them execute. So let's say, for example, like if you're talking about Instagram, you might do a video that would talk about, like, here's the 3 ways to develop content. And then you might have a text for info of, you know, get our checklist to set up basically your marketing campaign. And it could just be a simple checklist. And that becomes the new gated material that you offer, because that's the value add. So the first one is kind of the aspirational. We know that they're kind of thinking about that. We get down to here's the text, request this additional checklist information. They get back a PDF possibly. And then you take that information that comes in, because now they haven't visited a website, they haven't done anything.
Right.
But you take that particular phone number, you can upload it into Facebook as an example. You could do a retargeting campaign, and now you continue your branding with that particular person. And because you sent them a text message, in that text message could be, you know, if you have additional questions about this checklist, or, you know, want to schedule an appointment, you know, call or text me at this number. And you've kind of removed all of that friction and eliminated basically just friction as a whole for them to reach you whenever they're ready.
Yeah.
And that's the difference, right?
Yeah.
And
so, yeah, it's so good because, you know, you could also, even on an Instagram post, you could say, hey, here are 5 ways to grow your Instagram following. Text growth to this phone number, and I'll give you my step-by-step guide on how to implement these 5 ways. When they click the link, it could even be, like you said, a deep link to a page on your website that literally has nothing but a download button, but the page is pixeled. So they're automatically pixeled there. You can retarget them. You know, you can retarget them if you want, but now they've clicked on a page, they have a download button, they download right away. So you've delivered on the promise. Now you have the number and the pixel, which is amazing. And maybe even inside, what I've noticed, and I don't know what you think about this, I call a little content upgrade, right? Inside the PDF, you can say, hey, I'm doing a masterclass on this in the near future. Click here to tell me if you are interested in something like that. Put a button. That button can even go to an email form or whatever if you'd like. That way now you have pixel, phone number, and email. And I think that when I start to get all three of those, man, it starts to get very exciting.
Oh, for sure, because it's the, going back to the Amazon, abandoned cart experiment, right? They might be super high intent at that moment, but as soon as they're taken off track, then they kind of forget about that. And that's the power of the remarketing portion of this, right? If you can then give them an experience where they feel like they never filled anything out, and you gave them some content, and all of a sudden they start to see your brand all across the internet without ever having even visited a website. Like if you do a direct link to like a PDF guide, even though that PDF may be on your own website, but you're deep linking straight to, like you said, a download, a download button that is non-branded, there's no form, there's no nothing. The consumer feels like, wow, how, this business or this person is all over the place, right? Now, all of a sudden there's this brand recognition, and they don't really know with 100% certainty how that took place. They just think that, wow, this must be the best of the best, right? Because they're everywhere. And now you become omnipresent in their life. And that's really the journeys that you want to take an inquiry wherever they're at in that ART funnel, somehow identify that particular person, and then become omnipresent on all channels and give them the ability to communicate with you on all channels. Like we've done things where we've texted back the direct Facebook link to the Facebook Messenger, right? The fb.me. So do a short link, say like, hey, if you want to start a conversation with us, just send us a Facebook message. And now, they feel like, okay, that's not as intrusive. I don't need to text them. I'm going through their business page. And then they can see your reviews. They could do all those kind of things. So it's just a matter of getting creative and kind of breaking some of the most common patterns that are out there. Text for info too, there's a certain curiosity to it, right? Like if I use a real estate example, there's some really great companies out there, Altos Research, HomeBot, for example, that solve a really common question, which is, how's the real estate market, right? And I'll just use that as an example because both of you and I have, mutual customers in that space. Is if I send out a direct mail piece to that particular person, and that direct mail piece says, hey, visit, mylonguRL.com, and they got to fill out that long URL, put in their information to get their home value. There's a lot of friction there if I'm standing over the trash can on my kitchen counter looking at your direct mail piece. What's the odds that I'm going to take out my phone, type in my long URL, fill out the form, and
or an ugly QR code?
But vice versa, there's a little bit of a curiosity factor if you say, text home value or, how's the market to a specific phone number and get a free report, right? Now, I might still send them to the same landing page to get that information. But I remove some friction. I create a little bit of curiosity that initially in their mind, they're like, oh, this feels easy. And what you've done now is because you have that phone number, you can have a two-way dialogue with that customer really easily. And, all of your retargeting can be done even just off of the phone number, even if they never visited a website. And that's the power of that whole thing, because with that phone number, you build a Facebook custom audience, upload a list of phone numbers. And now all of a sudden, they're able to see all of the all your ads across both Instagram and Facebook, which, I mean, between those two, like
Yeah.
that's a pretty sizable market.
Yeah. Awesome. So Jesse, you spend a lot of time looking at talking to entrepreneurs, seeing their businesses from the inside out. And if someone had to ask you, hey, shake you in the middle of the night, but like, hey, what is the one thing that every entrepreneur should do, and you could say, hey, just remove a form, make this website, go through the journey yourself, install this. Like, if you said, like, what is the one or two things that you think everyone should at least consider installing in their business?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think if you think there's $750 billion or so spent on marketing. And if you think of the ultimate goal of marketing is what, right? If we could think of the ART funnel, aspirational, research, transactional, it almost doesn't matter what business you are in. What you want to try and do is develop a relationship with that customer. And you really, at the end of the day, want it to be nearly two-way for most businesses, unless it's, strictly product.
Right.
I think it's to really, start tracking what is that very bottom, the most valuable lead in the world that we have, which is the intent of someone picking up the phone and contacting us. We love the internet because we can know, which keyword drove what action to what form and all that stuff. But in that 700 and something billion dollars of money that's being spent, there's lots of data that shows that, calls go unanswered to businesses, and that people will call a phone number and hang up, or if they see a toll free, they won't even call. And so if we think of that highest intent journey as a consumer, and you think of your own journey as a consumer, the way that you go after a product or a service, you're typically going to follow that. I'm going to use the internet and aspirational. I'm going to self-educate. I'm going to work myself down the bottom of the funnel. And now the bottom of the funnel is not the buy button. It's usually the pick up the phone and make a phone call button to figure out if I can execute, especially the larger the ticket, the ticket price is. And so I think it's just to kind of come full circle back to that. Text messaging is going mainstream. If you look at the politicians, again, $10 billion spent in political advertising. These guys are not trying to send you to a website.
Yeah.
Right. If you are looking at late night TV, if you are a student of direct marketing and you look at the late night TV crowd, right? The late night TV crowd are also not sending you to a website anymore, right? They're asking you to
call a number.
Yeah, you want a testosterone pill, text, free trial to whatever phone number. And it's exactly for everything that I'm kind of mentioning to you, is that you're removing friction to get to a one-to-one dialogue or a peer-to-peer dialogue as quickly as possible. And then you just have this incredible ability to create conversation really quickly, because, most TV, almost everyone is a two-screen consumer now.
Yeah.
And so by two-screen, what we mean is they're watching TV, but they're on their phone. They're on their computer, but they're returning text messages. So that mobile device is the second screen that kind of transcends all other screens. And it's, it was designed as an attention machine. So,
amazing.
So you just got to work within its confines. And, at the end of the day, we don't say I lost my computer, right? We say I lost my phone. It's still a phone, right? At the end of the day, and its primary use is text and phone calls. So if we think that is accessible, to a 5-year-old or to a 105-year-old, and everyone understands that technology, and a simple phone number is like a simple domain name, you know, why not basically capitalize and come full circle on that consumer journey, you know, at the end of the day. So I think that that's, you know, I might be a little bit biased,
No. Hey, listen,
but you know,
yeah.
I bought a car and I've understood most of those journeys. And, you know, as a consumer, we just have to think of, you know, as a service provider, as a professional of any services, you've got to put yourself in the shoes of the consumer and understand that journey. So whatever you buy, sell, offer, take that journey in an unbiased way as a consumer, and, you know, gather your experiences across other channels. You know, all of us have bought high ticket items, whether it's a car. Think of your last, you know, car purchase. What was that long-term journey from beginning to end, that whole aspirational research transactional phase? And I think with that, you know, that's what marketers need to do the most, basically, not just, you know, pick up like, oh, let's, you know, put a big red buy button and, you know, build it and they will come.
So wild, man. Dude, you I could talk about this stuff with you all day. Can't thank you enough for
Likewise.
being a super friend to me, getting a chance to work together on many projects, and thank you for being on today. Hey, where can people were to go, want to find out more about what you're working on, how they can connect more with you? What's the best path for them?
Yeah, well, you know, I'll be a student of my own stuff. The easiest way is to just call or text me directly. You can reach me at area code 323-741-2255. I'm in California, so that's Pacific Standard Time, so please be mindful of that. If not, it's callaction.co. And if you just search for Jessie Beaudoin, which nobody can spell that, but if you type in Jessie B, a lot of times I might pop up somewhere. So
Awesome. Well, we'll make sure
that's how most people know me.
We'll make sure we link something up the show notes, and maybe you and I will come up with something special for everybody as well. So that'd be cool.
Sounds good, man. I appreciate it.
Jesse, can't thank you enough, man. That was so awesome.
Sharran, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity, and anything I can do, I look forward to doing this again with you.